When the first shots of World War I rang out in August 1914, military commanders on all sides expected a swift, decisive conflict. They envisioned cavalry charges, rapid advances, and victory by Christmas. Instead, they created something unprecedented in human warfare, a front line that barely moved for 4 brutal years. By November 1914, 2 parallel trench systems stretched 475 miles from the Belgian coast to the Swiss border. Between them lay a twisted wasteland they called no man's land, sometimes as narrow as 50 yards, sometimes stretching for miles. This strip of earth became the most contested real estate in human history. The trench system wasn't just a single line of defense. It was an intricate network resembling an underground city. The frontline trench, where soldiers faced the enemy directly, was just the beginning. Behind it lay support trenches, communication trenches that zigzagged to prevent enemy fire from sweeping entire sections, and reserve trenches where reinforcements waited for their turn in hell. German trenches became elaborate engineering marvels, some reaching depths of 40 feet, reinforced with concrete, equipped with electric lighting and ventilation systems. French and British trenches were typically shallower but equally complex, with fire steps for riflemen, observation posts for spotters, and dugouts for shelter from the constant bombardment. The defensive advantage was overwhelming and mathematically brutal. A machine gun crew of 3 men could hold off an entire battalion of attacking infantry. Artillery observers, safely positioned miles behind the lines, could direct devastating barrages on any movement in no man's land. Barbed wire, laid in dense entanglements 30 feet deep, channeled attacking forces into predetermined killing zones. For the first time in military history, defensive technology had completely outpaced offensive capabilities. Daily life in the trenches followed a grim, repetitive routine. Stand to at dawn, when visibility improved and attacks were most likely to come. Then came the endless tasks of maintenance, repairing parapets damaged by overnight shelling, pumping out water that seemed to seep from everywhere, cleaning weapons that constantly jammed in the mud, and stringing more wire. Always more wire. The statistics tell part of the story, but numbers cannot capture the human cost. On the first day of the Battle of the Somme, July 1st, 1916, the British Army suffered 60,000 casualties in a single day. By the end of that campaign, over 1 million men from all sides had been killed, wounded, or gone missing. The territorial gain after months of slaughter, 6 miles at its deepest point. Disease was as deadly as enemy bullets. Trench foot caused by prolonged exposure to wet conditions could lead to gangrene and amputation. Dysentery spread rapidly in the unsanitary conditions. Typhus carried by lice was endemic. Shell shock, what we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder, affected hundreds of thousands of men, many of whom were court-martialed for cowardice when they broke down under the unbearable psychological strain. Technology drove innovation at unprecedented pace. Poison gas made its debut, turning battlefields into chemical nightmares where men died choking on their own blood. Tanks were developed specifically to break the trench stalemate, though early models were crude, unreliable, and often broke down in no man's land. Aircraft evolved rapidly from simple reconnaissance tools to sophisticated fighters and bombers. Artillery dominated the battlefield beyond anything previous generations could have imagined. Preliminary bombardments could last for days, firing millions of shells that could be heard hundreds of miles away. The Battle of Verdun alone consumed 40 million artillery rounds over 10 months. The constant shelling created lunar landscapes of overlapping craters, completely obliterating all natural features and man-made structures. Communication was perhaps the greatest operational challenge. Telephone lines were constantly severed by shell fire. Radio technology was primitive and unreliable. Messages had to be carried by runners who sprinted across open ground under machine gun fire, by dogs specially trained to navigate the maze of trenches, or by carrier pigeons that faced their own aerial battles with hawks trained by the enemy. The economic impact was staggering and unprecedented. Entire national economies were reorganized around feeding the insatiable appetite of trench warfare. Factories that had produced consumer goods were converted overnight to manufacture shells, rifles, and endless coils of barbed wire. Women entered the workforce in numbers never seen before, replacing men who had marched off to war.